Back at it here on the Too Deep NFL podcast with many things going on as the offseason now gets into full swing. Reports that Russell Wilson wanted Pete Carroll fired and the general manager as well. What does this do to his legacy and his leadership in the NFL? The Jets met with Derek Carr. Didn't get a deal done. Should this be the top choice for the Jets? Where does Derek Carr land when it's all said and done? Are we finally going to get a quarterback middle class? Are the Rams going to get a deal done for Jalen Ramsey? Shockingly, he's on the trading block. Bobby Wagner's not a Ram anymore. Who can he help? Aaron Rodgers is out of the darkness. What did we learn? What did he learn from the darkness? We talk about it all next here on the 2D Podcast.
You're listening to the 2 Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. 2 Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro was the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. 2 Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the 2 Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome to the 2D Podcast. If you're catching us via the podcast, we do stream live on Tuesdays here during the off-season. Catch the pod Tuesday nights. We're not coming to you live tonight because it's Combine Week. Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, much to do during Combine Week, so we had to tape up. We appreciate everybody in the chat room and all the conversation that's going on, and we say hello to everybody that is catching us on the YouTube, the LinkedIn, the Twitter, anywhere you get your video stream as we do it, and we appreciate all the conversation. We look back on it that everybody has, so enjoy. Guys, let's dive right in, Jeff, to Russell Wilson. He's getting the guy he wanted back in Seattle. He wanted Pete Carroll out. This is part of what precipitated him being out of Seattle. Wanted Pete Carroll and John Schneider fired. What is this? The smiling, happy, nice guy all the time. Apparently had the knife out, ready to go back in Seattle. He's getting Sean Payton, who he allegedly wanted as the head coach in Seattle. So, is this a marriage? Is this bliss, or is this just a sign that he'll be wanting Sean Payton out here before long?
That Russell Wilson redefining the term passive aggressive. It's amazing what we're starting to hear about him. And I believe every word of what happened in Seattle, even though he denied it. It just felt like if you're going to make that kind of a deal, there has to be some kind of impetus behind it. And if you're trying to go to ownership and get the coach can, the GM can, that's like an NBA style. You're a Magic Johnson fan from back in the day. That's like a Lakers move, getting rid of Paul Westhead. Now, we'll see. I think there is that aspect of, I want to be this kind of quarterback and you're holding me back, blah, blah, blah. But now you actually got the coach you wanted, and we'll see if he actually can play ball with it. Like Russell Wilson, who I've, dealt with him many times. I think he's a great guy. I think he cares about playing football. I was reading a blog the other day that talked about why do people bag on this guy so much, and Deshaun Watson doesn't get nearly the kind of abuse that Russell Wilson gets. It's because he's always had a problem with people thinking he's not authentic. And so I think this kind of stuff does make you question, what's his real motivation? How big is his ego? Can Sean Payton deal with that? Because Drew Brees was a different kind of quarterback. He wasn't talking about legacy when he got to New Orleans. He wasn't worried about, having all these people in the building and having all these parking spaces and, what his hair looked like at the podium. And so I think Russell Wilson's got to go back to basics. This doesn't hurt him in Denver. but it does hurt him in the sense of who is this guy really, and is he really an elite quarterback? And I think everything that's happened to him over the last 18 months has made me question, at least I'm sure a lot of other people question, did we misjudge how good this guy really is?
Hey, Eric, what do you think it does for his legacy?
I mean, it's bad. It's not good. Like that he basically, raised and like like he looked horrible last year. Like there's no, and I think that, he's always been looking for this validation, 3rd round pick, wins a Super Bowl, but it was on the back of a great defense and, goes to another Super Bowl. And then after that, it's like, the training, they always kind of bottled him up. And then the one year they let him cook, and they only lasted half a season. And then he was terrible in the play. Like there's always like this part of Russell Wilson that feels like he's not comfortable in his own skin. And then when they like let him be him, it flops completely. And I do think it looks really bad. I think he was like Hall of Fame trajectory before this season. And now, when your own players don't respect you, like that's a really tough look. And I don't know how do you ever get that back as a leader? I just, especially when it's gone this far, I just don't see it. And everybody from here on out, it's always going to be pats on the head. Like, oh, Russ did a really good job of leading the team today. It's like all those are just going to be overcompensating pats on the head to a guy who I think many people don't respect.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that, how big his head got in Seattle. People got behind him on the let Russ cook. Well, he got to cook in Denver and it looked, it tasted like crap. It's clear that he needed this support. It's also clear he's the poster child for the win when you're on the rookie contract, isn't he, Jeff? That's really his legacy is that, maybe more than any other quarterback, like he's really good to have when you've got everything available to put around him. But since he's become expensive, the returns have been diminished greatly. And, he clearly was looking for a scapegoat. It's been the offensive coordinator in the past. It was Brian Schottenheimer for a while. The issue is Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and it's funny because if we go all the way back to start of his career, the Seahawks were going to try to start Matt Flynn at quarterback when he came in the league. We forget that stuff now, right? Like they'd signed him to a $10 million deal back then, which seemed like a big deal. And Russell Wilson outworked everybody to win that job. And I know a few people. Michael Robinson worked with me at NFL Network, was on that team early on. And he said the reason that Russell Wilson won them over was because of how hard he worked as a rookie. But then every step of the way, you would hear people talk about, he's too cozy with management. He's not spending enough time in the locker room. And these were all problems early on, but they could be offset because he had a veteran team around him and he had a coach who knew how to use him. And it's really a cautionary tale, really, for quarterbacks in this league. Lamar Jackson could listen to this. Kyler Murray could listen to this. Dak Prescott, all people who I think are good people, but ultimately there's only so many quarterbacks. It doesn't matter who's coaching them. It doesn't matter, what's around them. They're going to succeed. Most quarterbacks in this league, and that's probably the media's part. It's probably our role in this too, is we begin to inflate these guys' heads and make them think that, oh, you're great because you're winning all these games and you've never had a losing season and you won a championship. And we give them all these accolades, but we rarely say, this guy really is just this good. He ain't top of the mountain good. And I think that's what happened with Russell Wilson. He started believing his own hype.
Well, and that gets to our, what we're going to talk about with middle-class quarterbacks, right? It's just like, it's a very Boolean thing. Is this guy a guy or is he not? And I think with Wilson, it's sort of like, we're not comfortable saying what Russell Wilson's a 7 out of 10.
Yep.
And because we aren't. Daniel Jones wants $45 million. So that is
insane, by the way, since you're going to bring up Daniel Jones. That is insane.
Yeah.
That's $3 million a touchdown pass last year. $3 million per.
You're not going to get an argument from me there.
Well, let's talk about the middle class because I want to read you the average annual value, right? Each, your average per year. As we know, things are usually backloaded and it starts out low and goes higher. But just if you take the total deal, most of these total deals, are not ever meant to see every year of it done. But let me just go down when we talk about the lack of a middle class at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, $50 million. I'm going to round to the nearest million for ease of digestion of a bunch of numbers I'm going to throw at you. Aaron Rodgers, $50 million per. Russell Wilson, $49 million per. Kyler Murray, $46 million per. Deshaun Watson, $46 million. Patrick Mahomes, $45. Josh Allen, $43. Dak Prescott, $40. Matt Stafford, $40. Kirk Cousins, 35, right? We're coming down. There's a little bit. 34.
Eric's guy.
Yeah, 34 for Jared Goff. Carson Wentz at 32. Matt Ryan at 30. Okay. Ryan Tannehill, 30. Next, Jameis Winston, 14.
There's a chasm every freaking year that's like $20 million.
And after that, Marcus Mariota, 9. Trevor Lawrence, 9. Joe Burrow, 9.
Those are rookie contracts too.
Yeah, Zach Wilson, 9. These are all rookie deals. And highly drafted guys. Trey Lance, 9. Baker Mayfield, 8. I don't know what was going on there. Tua, 8. Again, the rookie contract. Like, it is unreal how this is set up, right, Eric? Like, how does the math work out that teams that have cap guys all are somehow getting duped into paying way too much for quarterbacks in this league?
Well, I think it's a weird thing. I think it's more the fact that the price of a quarterback grows with the franchise tag, right? The franchise tag is the average of the top 5 APY at any given time. And that, for the great guys like Mahomes, they're just being underpaid. I think the lack of price elasticity is more on the great players like Mahomes, like Allen, guys like that who might earn more. And what ends up happening, though, is that the instruments that the teams have to use to keep in place the players like Daniel Jones and the players like Kyler Murray and the players like that is the average of all the guys like Mahomes and stuff like that, right? So, teams are so worried about walking on a guy like Daniel Jones that they'll threaten the franchise tag. Whereas Daniel Jones is like, well, if you give me $45 million, the exclusive tag, the non-exclusive tag is about 32. If you give me the exclusive tag, then I will take it, and I think so that the franchise tag really does, bottle up salaries into that top 5 APY, especially at a position like quarterback. So you contrast it to like the NBA, right? So like the Timberwolves traded for Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is like kind of redundant with Karl Anthony Towns, but you can play both at the same time. Quarterbacks, like if you walk on Daniel Jones, you have to find another guy to play all those snaps. And it like teams are worried about that, and that's why there's not price elasticity, because like this guy either is your guy or he's not. And as such, he's either going to get paid as your guy or not. And that causes like these ridiculous sort of chasms between the haves and the haves not at the QB position.
Are we going to see any change, Jeff, in this? I actually think we might. I think it's become such a thing. Like I remember back in the day chirping about rookie contracts for quarterbacks, going back to the Carl Peterson era, and that wasn't a thing. People hadn't figured out that basic arithmetic 10 years ago. Now everybody talks about it. To me, if everybody's talking about that, then they got to get that the expensive guys are the problem. And I think somebody like the Giants, are they the perfect team to hold the line and say, we'll stay the course with you, but you're worth like 20, right? That's what you don't make mistakes, but you don't really make plays. And we can live with that at $20 million per. Does Derek Carr, in his shopping, we can get to him in a little bit, and Jimmy Garoppolo and these guys that are clearly being, not good enough to carry the franchise big money contracts with their old teams. Do new teams now look at them and do we find a market that creates what should be a middle class for quarterbacks?
I think we do. I think you're seeing more GMs who are saying, I think what Brad Holmes, the Lions general manager, said at the end of the season, he said it's much easier to get worse at quarterback in this league than it is to get better at it. There's a lot of truth in that, where it's just like you can actually hurt your team more by believing in the idea. And again, this is a media creation of it's a quarterback-driven league. It's a passing league. That means you got to find someone to spin it, at a high level for you. And then you end up misjudging these guys and paying them because you don't want to take the risk and do the work, really, of finding 52 other guys to round out your team. That's something that I was talking to Ray Farmer, the Rams, he works for the Rams now. He's with the Chiefs at one point, the Browns general manager. He made a great point about their approach to going all in, whatever the last 4 or 5 years to win championship. He said, look, yeah, you lose these draft picks, but on the flip side of it, you actually spend more time thinking about how can a day 3 pick help your team. And I think a lot of these GMs have gotten to the point over the last couple of decades of just trying to figure out if we can get one savior in here, one guy to really make it happen, our Tom Brady, our Peyton Manning, whoever, it'll work out for us. And you don't have to operate that way anymore. And I think there's more support, probably because of flag football, fantasy football, and probably because of all over the cap and Spotrac, all these things people can use to chart personnel moves, that people are a lot more open to the idea of saying, hey, this guy isn't worth paying the money to play this position. Why should we do it? So take away the scrutiny you're going to get from the public, take away the desire to try to find a savior, and then you find your way into a middle class of quarterbacks who are getting paid more what they're worth.
The fear of the unknown is what drives the market, right? Yeah. Like, I at least know what I have with Daniel Jones, and I'd rather overpay for Daniel Jones as opposed to head out there and say Jacoby Brissett is let's see what we can do with him. But has the modern offense that they're taking the things away over the top. We're seeing wide receivers running the ball, kind of expanding the running game, bringing it back, not with your traditional just pitch it to the tailback, Eric, but is the evolution of where offensive football's gone empower somebody like the Giants with Brian Daboll to say, no, we'll make it go with, we'll look for a rookie in the draft and I'll take the bargain side of things.
I don't think so yet. You interact with people and you interact with smart people like Andrew Brandt, like people on, in football media are just like, I know that, we're bumping up against a ceiling here, but man, I don't want to be bad forever. And I want to read off for a little bit. Here are the records in 2022 of teams that took a quarterback in round 1 the last 3 years. Cincinnati was 12-4. The Chargers were 10-7. The Miami Dolphins were 9-8. The Packers, it's a little bit weird because they weren't constructing their team off of the quarterback on a rookie contract. 8-9. Jacksonville was 9-8. The Jets won 7 games, 7-10. The San Francisco 49ers were 13-4. The Chicago Bears were 3-14. The New England Patriots were 8-9, and the Pittsburgh Steelers were 9-8. The Pittsburgh Steelers drafted one of the most feeble first-round quarterbacks that we've ever seen and went 9-8. I think teams need to sort of jump in, the water's warm. You can, if you, and this gets back to my, something I said on the Sumer Sports Show the other day, whereas, people were talking about 5 years ago, hey, the Cowboys should just re-sign Dak because, in 5 years, Breeze and Brady and all those guys are going to retire. He's going to be a top 6 quarterback. But the problem is just because everybody else leaves and you all of a sudden by default become a top 8 quarterback doesn't make you better at the job, right? So then now there's so much more opportunity, especially in the NFC, to win with defense, to win with a running game, to win the way that the Niners win. And if you rush to give the Daniel Joneses of the world, the Kirk Cousins of the world, the Ryan Tannehills of the world, those deals because they're 8th in some silly list where there's only 4 or 5 good guys, then you turn your back on winning the way that the Eagles win and the way that all these other teams win because you're scared of being Detroit. Detroit and Jacksonville were the top 2 teams in the draft this year, and they both went 9-8. The water's warm. And but I do not think that I still think the average person is well, what if we get rid of Alex Smith? Are we going to be bad again for another decade? And they don't realize that the math is with you. If you go and get a rookie quarterback, you can build the rest of the team, and then your defense is not facing Peyton Mannings every week. You're not facing Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers every week. They're facing Kirk Cousins every week, and you got a shot, as the Giants showed.
Yeah, well, and you're also buying time because, and the Chiefs did this too. We kind of forget this now because Mahomes is so good, but the Chiefs built the team and then added Mahomes to it. They went through all these years with Alex Smith. It's what the Eagles are doing. It's what the Rams did. And that's really the more sensible approach, which is to say, let's keep trying to find ways to make our team better. And then when we find the guy who we know can get us there, let's invest in him. Those numbers you just rattled off, Serena, the highest paid quarterback, like the 4 of the top 5 guys are headaches right now.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers is a headache. Kyler Murray's a headache. I forget who else was on the list, but like you go down that list and you say, do you want to have all this money tied up in these kind of guys? It's
Russell Wilson. The top 3 are
Wilson.
Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray. Deshaun Watson may be a solution when it's all said and done, but that situation's even kind of a headache. And then Mahomes, Allen, Dak Prescott. I mean, ESPN can't turn on a camera without talking about whether or not he should be paid or have his contract going on. So that it's not like he's been the answer there. And what I think is interesting, even when you get down to like Ryan Tannehill, who I mentioned, is at about $30 million on average. He originally, I think the Titans are kind of the one team that did play it right. They had the rookie quarterback in Marcus Mariota. They gave it a shot once Mike Vrabel got there. They gave it a shot. Then they said, no, we're going to go get this veteran guy who was making nothing at the time in Ryan Tannehill, and we're going to give him the reins. And he played well. He played really well. And so they rewarded him, and it's been diminishing returns ever since, right?
It's the same song and dance with literally every quarterback except for Mahomes and at times Rodgers, like all the truly elite players. But my issue is, and it used to be this way. Like I think about, and you guys know me, I'm a huge junkie. I'm like watching old football games all the time. And like in the 90s, when the salary cap started, it was Young, Aikman, chill out for a sec, Petro. Young, Aikman, Elway, Marino, like 2 other guys. And then it's like Eric Kramer goes Bears, Lions, Dave Craig goes on every freaking team and makes a playoff. And it's like, Warren Moon goes Oilers to Viking, and then Seahawks and then Chiefs eventually. And it's like
Chris Chandler.
And Warren Moon's Hall of Famer, but
Stan
Humphries made a Super Bowl. Neil O'Donnell made a Super Bowl, and then he left the year after he made a Super Bowl. They put it for the Jets. Boomer Esiason goes, Bengals, Jets. Like all of these teams, like back then, were not so Jim Everett. We're not so worried about. By the way, I met Jim Everett and Jim Rome on the same day at the Super Bowl. That was a monumental, if anybody remembers old media. And it was fine. And you had negotiations. Now the issue is, and like you talk about rookie deals, Petro, I still don't believe, because teams used to be so hesitant to move to the younger quarterback 20 years ago because those younger quarterbacks cost about the same. Right. And the other lurking variable here is that there is not an incentive for NFL teams to develop young guys. When you think about like Tony Romo sitting behind Drew Henson and Drew Bledsoe, it was because if Dallas ever wanted to like reset and get an elite guy at the position, they had to trade up to 1, then pay the guy, Sam Bradford kind of contract. That's just so onerous now that now it's just like, well, the Jets can go Darnold, Wilson, and it's like these things don't cost a lot. But then now in the early part of the millennium, you had guys like Gannon, Delhomme, Brady, Kurt Warner, all these like guys without much capital invested in them, winning, making Super Bowls. And now you just don't, like Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson are really like our only examples of guys who have no first round, draft capital invested in them. And I think that lack of alternative also hurts what we're talking about, because if you move on from Daniel Jones, I mean, are you going to go with Tyrod Taylor? Like, are you going to go with the league should have more plentiful sort of backups that have experience.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Derek Carr goes to the Jets. Jeff talks there. That seems like I think everybody kind of agrees. I don't know that he can handle necessarily all the atmosphere of the New York market, but what do you make of him, and where does he ultimately land, and what is his price? He's asking for $10 million less than Daniel Jones. The reports are he's in the $35 million range, which would put him down towards the bottom of that upper tier. What's the number and what's the team when it's all said and done?
Well, I don't know how the Jets let him walk out of the building. I don't know how he leaves there. I mean, it's probably a more dangerous game for the Jets than it is for Derek Carr because he's going to have more opportunities. If the Jets are sitting here waiting for Aaron Rodgers to materialize, that's just a way more complicated process to play out. And it's still you're landing with a quarterback who's got a lot of problems he's bringing to the table right now that we don't know if he's going to resolve in terms of, mentality and attitude and everything else. I just think Derek Carr to the Jets makes too much sense for it not to happen. And he's getting everything he's probably ever wanted from an NFL team with, good defense, ton of weapons, good offensive line. Breece Hall will be back, so he'll have good running game, good running backs to work. Everything you'd want as a quarterback, a veteran quarterback, is there. And so if he's, being honest about the money he wants to get, and if he wants being honest about having a chance to win a championship, that's got to be the place you go. Like everywhere else, you're not going to get that in New Orleans. You're not getting that in Indianapolis. You're not going to get that in Carolina. Why he wouldn't get a deal done now, I don't know. But I think he feels like time is on his side. He can look around. But sooner or later, there'll be more players in this game. If he misses that boat, then he just ends up having, kind of a mediocre end of his career.
Do you see a chair getting pulled out from under him in a game of musical chairs with Derek Carr, Eric, or is he pretty bulletproof eventually? He's the top guy, so they're going to wait, and somebody will be all in for him. The bidding war will continue.
I sort of disagree that the New York thing. I do agree that for Carr that makes the most sense. If I were the Jets, would be a little hesitant just because it's one of those where you're signing Carr to try to win the 2022 season when you have to win the 2023 season, which is going to come with injuries to your defense and regression and all that. So, is Carr good enough for them to make the playoffs last year? Yes. Is he going to be good enough in the AFC where Miami hopefully will have 2 of the whole season? Buffalo is still good, and New England hopefully can continue to grow with Mac Jones. I honestly think that for Carr, you should prefer a team like the Panthers. I just don't think the Panthers, after years of them going with Bridgewater, Darnold, Bridges from Cam Newton to the next guy, and Frank Reich going from, Rivers to Wentz to Matt Ryan. I think Carolina is going to draft a quarterback. I think it's pretty plain that they're going to go. But if you're Carr, you don't want to go to the AFC because you're not good enough to win in the AFC. There's evidence that you're just not that good and so you want to go play in the waters of an NFC where Daniel Jones can win a playoff game, Kirk Cousins can win 13 games, Dak Prescott can win 12 games. You want to play there. My issue is other than San Francisco, maybe somewhere, what's your option there? Because I think Atlanta, I think Atlanta is going to end up with Lamar Jackson at the end of the day. Where I actually think the Jets are probably going to be the solution, but I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and that's why we talk about the middle class. He's a guy who belongs in it, but he's probably the best of the bunch. If you're the Jets, I would think Jimmy Garoppolo. What is Jimmy Garoppolo asking for? Because I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a lot of whatever Derek Carr is, and more in some categories. Right now, injury prone, yes, yeah. Injury prone, yes, but part of the reason he's injury prone is because he'll stand in and take a shot to deliver the ball. And Derek Carr, that's the question, is he's doing a great job of keeping himself healthy and giving himself an opportunity to make money. That's for sure. But I do think it'll be interesting to see how all the quarterback plays out because Jacoby Brissett, I think has played well enough. I was looking here, Eric's old employer, Pro Football Focus, quarterback grades. Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes tied at number 1. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, largely off his running ability. 6, Jacoby Brissett. 7, Andy Dalton. 8, Tua.
Jacoby Brissett was really good last year, and
I that's what I'm saying. Why not just do a deal with Jacoby Brissett and let him use the weapons that the Jets have accumulated there?
You can't sell Jacoby Brissett to the New York media.
I'm going to be honest with you.
With Nathaniel Hackett calling the plays?
I'm going to be honest with you guys. Derek Carr is a cooler Tim Tebow from a head not from a playing perspective, but from a how he'll handle the New York media. That first press conference is going to be. Remember Tim Tebow's first press conference with New York? It was I'm excited. Derek Carr is is not made for the New York media. He's a good
I agree
quarterback.
with that.
Average quarterback, above average quarterback, certainly. But from a, like, you can't sell him. I guarantee you 4 weeks into that season, there's going to be tabloids written about Derek Carr that are going to be like, what the heck? What are we doing here, boys? When they're 0-4 and they're facing Buffalo the next week.
Can I object a little bit on the he can't work in New York? I get that mindset because he is sensitive. And we know people who've covered the teams that he's played for and what the vibe is. There's so much media in New York. He couldn't even begin to head over to a guy and be like, why are you writing this or anything? Like, it would be, he'll be overwhelmed to the point that he might actually, grow up and just shut it all down. Don't turn on the radio, don't turn on the TV, and don't pick up a paper.
Derek Carr is Russell Wilson with just less attention because he hasn't won as much. Like, they're both lame as hell. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I do. Like, imagine if what happened in Denver this year happened in New York to Russell Wilson.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, he might not have made it out. I feel like Derek Carr, if he goes there and these Jets fans have expectations, that guy wearing the freaking barrel around his body, like, he might murder Derek Carr himself if he starts throwing picks at the end. Like, have you seen Derek Carr play in bad weather?
The fireman, yeah, they'd see him throwing his helmet, throwing his Chiefs hat, our Chief hat out on the on the field. Yes, I think it would be. I think it could be quite a spectacle, and maybe that's why he left. He's like, I can't do New York, right? I'm out. Like, I'll take anything but New York. Maybe that's
them telling him that he could be a first ballot Hall of Famer if he performs well in New York. I think that there are men for whom that scares more than it like empowers, right? I think some people are like, oh, what, and Derek Carr's playing career is a protracted, like, what happens if I fail kind of mentality. Like, you watch him play and he's a very good player. He's very accurate. He has a ton of skill, but he plays like a guy who would suck in New York. I'm just saying that.
But his brother was a backup to Eli Manning, so he has somebody to bounce him. He gets some intel. He gets some information on what it's like.
And then his brother went to San Francisco and lost his job to Troy Smith. So, like, New York did not season David Carr at all. Yeah. I don't know. Like, that family. Look, I'm not trying to cast judgment. We all have, but like, he plays like a guy who would suck in New York.
The 2D podcast proudly brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. We love all of our great listeners and the folks viewing here on the stream as well. You want to support the podcast? Help support our sponsors. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater KC area. Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they disappear when you go with GAN. They've been serving Kansas City since 1994. Every project comes with a written warranty, no commissions, free consultations. You get it all at GANasphalt.com. That's GANasphalt.com. And of course, they're hiring as well. All positions, project manager, drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour with paid time off and insurance, just among some of the benefits. Find out more at GANasphalt.com. Shockingly, Jeff, the Rams are looking at moving Jalen Ramsey. The Rams are going to cost a lot of fans a lot of misery because they threw all this stuff together. They went out and got every, rebel without a cause and put them on one team and made it work, right? Like, Jalen Ramsey shot his way out of one team in Jacksonville, got to the Rams. It worked. Like, what's the market for a guy who doesn't seem to be content anywhere he goes?
Oh, it'll be big because he can cover. He'll be, I personally think Eric and my Detroit Lions should be interested. Yeah. He smells like the perfect Raider, to be honest with you. They've got some salary cap flexibility, need help on defense, but he'll have a market because he's still a top 5 corner in this league. I mean, he's a big corner on top of that. So he can end up playing safety for you for a long time after he's done on the perimeter. So, yeah, I think he definitely is going to have a market. And I would imagine that, Brad Holmes, the Lions general manager, was with the Rams for a long time. And so he's going to have a relationship there. I could certainly see them having discussions about making that kind of move because the Lions, as we saw, as Eric predicted, made it. The roar was, I'll say, it was semi-restored. It was kind of like that Lion King when Simba tries to roar before he's a man, and he just kind of comes out a little squeak. They're at that point, but they can make a a big splash this offseason by getting a player like that and helping their defense out. So yeah, I can see Detroit or the Raiders being players here.
Eric, what does the math say? I'm looking at the grades on cornerbacks. 22-year-old Sauce Gardner, 1. 22-year-old Patrick Surtain, 2. 28-year-old Jalen Ramsey, number 3. Like, this would be the Rams selling at the absolute right time, wouldn't it? After that, the ages 26, 26, 23, 26.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit of running back attrition at this position. You know, the Darrell Greens of the world we haven't seen for a while, playing all pro level corner at 35, 36 years old. What do you think? What does the math say the market should be?
Yeah, so I agree with you that for a lot of corners, you know, the market, you know, and cornerback play is oscillatory, right? So sometimes you have, you know, a situation where you know, a player can you know, perform, like James Bradbury was really good one year in New York, then really bad, and then really good in Philadelphia. Like, these things oscillate so much. The name that I think about when I think about Ramsey, though, is Charles Woodson. I think, like, when you look at, you know, a guy who has inside outside flexibility, he's able to man up on tight ends, he's able to man up in the slot, even with his size, he's able to play outside. Guys like that are useful for a lot longer, much like Woodson, right? Like Charles Woodson, when he was drafted by the Raiders, was an outside corner that was fantastic, got hurt. You know, people thought he was washed. He goes to Green Bay and he's playing kind of that star position that Ramsey plays all over the place. And then he moves to safety at the end of his career, and you can get value out of a player like that. I think that Ramsey, that's the kind of guy that you're trading for when you trade for him. And so, you know, is he 20 million APY? Probably. Is it a gamble? Probably. But I do think, you know, he's different than like Revis and Gilmore were, where those guys are mostly outside guys who just kind of, and when they fall off, they're going to fall off a lot. When I think of Ramsey, I think of, yes, if he loses his outside corner playing ability, you just play him in places where he'll still be valuable to your defense and still enhance your defense. So I don't think he's like that big of a gamble. I do think it's going to be costly for whoever trades for him. And if I were, you know, Detroit, I'd think about it, but I'd also think about Jamel Dean out of Tampa Bay as an unrestricted guy. You know, I think there are other options for teams as well. So I think he'll have a market for sure because of kind of his Charles Woodson-like, I think, career arc.
Yeah, and Jamel Dean, 2 years younger. He's only 26,
Yep.
2.5 years younger than
Jamel Dean is going to be, in my opinion, the Stephon Gilmore of this free agent class. I think whoever signs him, it's going to be like, oh, he had up and down, you know, but the talent's clearly there. And if he goes to a team that, you know, will play to his strengths, I think he'll be a defensive player of the year kind of player wherever he goes.
Whoa.
wow.
Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Defensive player of the year.
How about Bobby Wagner? You know, the Rams make a big move to go get him, and 1 year later, after a disappointing season, they bail. Is this the right move for the Rams? Is this signaling the big rebuild, or, you know, are they making a mistake? He still played at a very, very high level for them last year.
Well, I think Les Snead, their general manager, said, like, look, they've made some moves and they picked up some debt along the way, and now it's time to deal with the debt. And that's what Bobby Wagner is. I mean, I think he's a phenomenal talent, as you said, still at an advanced stage, but he's also a culture setter. And so for me, if I'm the Chicago Bear with a whole bunch of money, a lot of salary cap space, and you just got rid of Roquan Smith and you want somebody to come in and help some of these young guys get going, I'd look at someone like that. I think he makes sense for a team like that, or a contending team that, you know, he's willing to take less money. I don't think he's looking for a big payday anymore. I think he's looking for a place where he can impact the team. Yeah, that's why he went to the Rams. He's from LA. They won a championship. But again, I think the Bears would make sense if you want somebody to come in there and set a tone for your franchise. But I think wherever he goes, he's going to help somebody because he's still a pretty good player.
What about back to, you know, Seattle? I mean, they've got room. Why not where it all got started? Eric, what do you make of the Rams walking on Wagner?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough state, right? Where if the player wants to go somewhere where he can win and you need the cap relief, that means you're not only unable to win, but you're unable to spend money, which is like, obviously you're happy that they won a Super Bowl, flags fly forever, but that's a tough situation for the Rams to be in. Yeah, I mean, Wagner is still really good. You know, I think, you know, he's one of those players that kind of like defies age curves a little bit. So Seattle's a good one. Chicago, to Jeff's point, Chicago has to spend that money. And generally speaking, if you spend that on aging players on shorter term deals, you might do better than, remember when Tampa Bay went with like Michael Johnson, Alteron Werner, Clint McDonald, and I can't remember who the other one was. And it's like, you're screwed then if you do it that way, because those guys, you're signing them to long deals and they're not good enough. And so he's going to be one of the few free agents that's going to offer a value this year to whoever signs him. And there are going to be teams that are looking, because you look at like the 49ers defense and what Fred Warner does and how much he changes the numbers for a defense like that. And what Roquan Smith did for the Ravens, they had an easier schedule, but like you look at the impact of what a truly elite linebacker is, I think teams are going to chase after that with Wagner.
Yeah. How about the Raiders? I mean, you mentioned the defensive side, Jeff. I mean, wouldn't he be you talk about setting the culture and everything. I think he'd be a great fit for the Raiders as well. Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers, because he wants us to. He does things.
Cannot.
That we will continue to talk about Aaron Rodgers. What would a 2D podcast be without mentioning Aaron Rodgers, Jeff? He's out of the darkness. Perhaps he's seen the light now and is ready to what? Lead there in Green Bay. Like, none of us give any thought to the idea that he's not going to play. We've talked about it before, think the Packers would be happy to move on and bite the bullet on whatever it is. As he emerges from the darkness, what do you think we're going to hear next from Aaron Rodgers when he gets on the couch and bears his soul to Pat McAfee and lets us know what's going on?
I think he's going to be thinking about moving on. I feel like, he made I think with Aaron, you always have to read between the lines of his comments. And he made a comment to McAfee a few weeks ago I think at the end of the season when the postseason was going on. He said, they're actually talking about my future without including me, or they're talking about doing something without having me involved. That's interesting to me. And I think that what he was saying was like, screw these guys. I've already told them, you talk about me, you talk about my future with this team, I should be the first person you call. And I just suspect that he does not want to go through another year like he went through in Green Bay, nor does he probably want to invest the time to avoid that kind of thing happening. And so by that, I mean, I don't think he's going to all of a sudden, hey, let's get all the receivers together. Let's go out to California and hang out in the offseason and get to know each other and, build some chemistry like Patrick Mahomes did with his group in Kansas City. I think he's going to keep being Aaron Rodgers. And I think he's smart enough to know that, one, I'm not giving up that check. And two, if I'm going to keep being me, I better find a place that has more seasoned people, that has more coaches who want to let me do what I want to do. And Brett Favre walked out of here. I can do it too.
Eric, what did he emerge with? What's the plan?
I don't know, man. He's probably going to go play for the Jets. It's probably going to be a disaster, and we're all gonna wish that the guy could just be comfortable in his own skin and retire 2 or 3 years ago, right? Like that. I think Rodgers is, always wanted that validation of, and he's been in a small town. There's like the guy just looks like he's wrestling with some really like strong internal demons, and like everybody's been giving him validation for 10 years. I mean, he's won 4 MVPs. Like, the entire, community in Wisconsin and Green Bay, like, love him. And he still is unable to be happy with that. So I feel like there's no solution to his problem. Like, I just think he's going to go somewhere, and in his mind, he's going to be like, oh, this is a new leaf. And like, I'm finally, and it's going to be disappointing. Like, that's always how it is for people like that. And, I think that he's got enough talent. Like, his statistics last year weren't great, but they were about the same as Brady's were in New England before he left for Tampa Bay. So there's certainly a chance that he'll be okay. But I mean, if he goes somewhere like, the Jets, like, that's the AFC is not easy, right? And the reason that the reason I think his career feels incomplete right now is he didn't win Super Bowls. And like, does he think he's going to go to the Jets and win a Super Bowl? Like, I don't know. I don't really find him amusing anymore.
I don't think many do. Jeff, why, you've talked to Aaron Rodgers for a long time. Why do we worry so much about Derek Carr working in New York, but everybody's got it being no problem for Aaron Rodgers to handle the New York media? Like, is that a combination that would work or would implode in your mind?
Oh, I think Aaron, like Russell Wilson, we talked about earlier on the show. I mean, he's got a pretty sizable ego. I think he would welcome sparring with the New York media. I mean, he wanted to be a host of Jeopardy. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, every room he walks into. So I don't think he would have a problem dealing with that part of it. I think that it's really, and I was thinking about this, I'm not trying to advocate for people getting married and having children, but I just don't know. Like most people at this point in their careers, they have people around them who are saying, like, what do you want? What do you need? They have things pulling at them in different directions. Even Tom Brady, who got divorced, he's trying to figure out, I want to play in a warmer climate. I want to be able to stay on the East Coast, see my kids, this kind of stuff. Like Aaron doesn't have that kind of stuff. And so he's got to go into these caves and try to find some peace of mind to make these decisions. I think it's harder to do as you get older. I mean, we all have more perspective and more of a greater sense of ourselves as we get older. But if you don't have people around you providing more perspective and helping you shape that, I think it can be hard for you. So I think what Eric's saying is true.
He's not going to get any better. Like he's already, like, I think that for a guy like him, it's like you're trying to achieve, and Jeff nailed it. It's like the guy's alone, right? Like he's tried, like, remember the year he won MVP and like he randomly, I have a fiance now. It's like, what did you do? Like, it's like, and it just feels like he's constantly overcompensating for something. And, the achievement is only going to wane over time. So I think we're only going to see more and more crazy stuff come out of his mouth over the next few years. And it's just not frustrating. I mean, the guy's clearly going through stuff. So I want to have empathy for him, but it is exhausting, I would imagine, for the people around him. And I can imagine Green Bay, their front office is like, look, man, you've given us a lot of good years, but holy buckets, you're becoming a little bit high maintenance at this point.
Yeah, I like what you said about, like, listen, if you're screaming for attention, you have to keep screaming louder because people are like, okay, I've heard that. So you got to keep doing something bigger and newer and all that. And he seems to be kind of going wide receiver diva, like he's Antonio Browning it. I don't know when he'll be throwing furniture off a balcony, but it's coming at some point.
Is he gonna be doing sit-ups in his front yard like T.O.? Like I don't know.
Yes, it's coming. Yes,
yeah. It's like that. You ever see Officer and a Gentleman at the end of that movie where everybody graduates and everybody throws their hats up in the air and Richard Gere's like walking around like, who am I going to hug? Everybody's going to family. Who do I have here?
Yeah, that's a great. It's an old callback, but for a guy like me, I get it. Eric's looking at us like, I don't know what that.
Jeff's take that he should have just married Olivia Munn while the getting was good, I think is a good take.
Yeah.
Yes. It would have
only downhill from there.
Yeah,
honestly,
it's only been downhill.
Now she's the kid with John Mulaney, who's not funny, according to Petro.
That's we're not going down that road. That's a subject that takes more time. We want to thank our sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the Kansas City area. You got your business has any kind of problem with the parking lot of any kind, full service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. And they're hiring. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. Kansas City's best is at your service. You can find them at GannAsphalt.com. So for Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, my name is Soren Petro. A lot of talk about the combine as these guys are all over it. That's what we'll be getting into next week when we rejoin you for the 2D podcast. Until then, we say thank you.